back at the rest of us began to bob up and down rhythmically. He became apoplectic, the glasses speeding up to a disco-like tempo when he learned that there'd be no hotel voucher because the delays to his first flight had been caused by weather. He stormed off in a huff, still cursing under his breath as he headed toward the bar. Next up was a well-dressed woman who seemed just a bit too made up for the airport. She related her tale of woe, voice trembling with tearful sincerity. She needed to get to Boston to see her sister before surgery. Her plans were now ruined, and she demanded a hotel room as well as a full refund. No dice. Marta, as the desk agent's bewinged name tag read, wasn't biting, not even when the passenger's quiet sniffling developed into a full-fledged tantrum. After continued hysterics, she finally moved to the side and began furiously punching buttons on her cell phone. Now it was my turn. Obviously, I needed a different strategy. Yelling wasn't working with Marta. Neither was crying. My wife had grown so discouraged that she had already left the line for the comfort of a nearby bench, taking out a magazine from her carry-on to pass the time. And that's when I saw the light. Right at that moment, it dawned on me that I was uniquely equipped to figure out how to successfully navigate this interaction. After all, this is what I'd been studying as I worked toward my PhD, the nature of situations. Of course, not this exact situation, involving angry passengers or stoic airline agents. Then, as now, my research examined the ways in which we think and act differently in contexts that are racially diverse, as well as how people make decisions in legal settings like the courtroom. But the basic principles still applied to this, the most mundane of circumstances. To understand human nature, you must appreciate the power of situations. I took a figurative step back from the counter to assess as objectively as I could the context I was in, something that I'm pretty sure sunglasses guy and makeup lady hadn't done. They simply saw Marta as the enemy, the flesh and bones representation of the faceless airline that had screwed us. And make no mistake, the airline had screwed us. They knew that a dozen of us were in the airport making our way to the gate from another terminal. They knew this was the last flight out, yet they still closed the boarding door 10 minutes before the posted departure time and then had the nerve to tell us we were on our own for the night. So I understood my fellow passengers' anger, and I could see why, in their minds, Marta deserved our wrath. Who else was there to take it out on? But I also knew there was more to this situation. And besides, the whole righteous indignation bit didn't seem to be working too well. The setting called for more than just a knee-jerk emotional response. This was a social puzzle waiting to be solved. From the wide-lens view of the situation, Marta didn't look to me like a heartless automaton. In her mid to late 30s, she wore a wedding band and a heart-shaped locket. At least somebody, somewhere, found her lovable. She looked haggard. She had probably spent a full day being berated for gate decisions she hadn't made and policies she hadn't created, and the job was becoming even more difficult as the night grew long and the passengers more agitated. She was the airline's sacrificial lamb, designated to stand there and absorb our abuse so that the rest of the company didn't have to. Accordingly, she eyed me warily, resigned to the verbal and emotional onslaught that I would inevitably bring as the next person in line. I recognized that I needed to shake things up, to exaggerate the contrast between my approach and that of the passengers before me. I started by acknowledging the unpleasant circumstances in which we both found ourselves. "Hi, how are you?" I asked, in the friendliest voice I could muster. "Look, I know that this isn't your fault, and that you're having just as long a night as we are." Marta blinked, unmoved. She said nothing. "But put yourself in my shoes, too," I continued. "The airline gave us an itinerary with a tight connection. They knew our flight plane was a few minutes late and that this was the last flight out, and they still made a conscious decision not to hold the plane. Fine, I get that." Marta's eyes widened just a bit. She looked confused by the direction the conversation was taking. "I really do," I said calmly. "It costs money each minute the plane is at the gate, so it's cheaper to pull away than to wait for a handful of passengers. We came out on the short end of the financial analysis, and I can live with that. But now the airline has to deal with those of us on the short end, right?"